Alright, so let's start off looking at this problem. We have an 18x squared minus 42x minus 120, and they're asking us to factor. And that's significant, right? The directions, they mean something to us. So remember, the first step in factoring is to take out the greatest common factor. So what would the greatest common factor be? 6. Okay, so let's go ahead and take out a 6. And inside the parentheses, we're going to have 3x squared minus 7x minus 20. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's factored completely. So we've got to look at inside the parentheses. And one way of approaching it would be to try to split the middle term. So we're going to look at 3 times a negative 20, which is a negative 60. So are there any factors of a negative 60 that would add to give me a negative 7? Okay, a negative 12 and 5. Let's double check our signs. Since that product's negative, it tells me the signs have to be different, so that's good. They're also going to have to add to give me a negative 7, and those two numbers do. All right, I don't want to forget about the 6. So I have 3x squared minus 12x plus 5x minus 20. And we're going to factor by grouping. So looking at that first grouping, what could we take out of that first grouping? 3x, excellent job. Leaving me with x minus 4. What about the other grouping? 5, it's a positive 5, leaving me with x minus 4. Those parentheses should look the same. And they do. So I have x minus 4 times 3x plus 5. What needs to go out in front? The 6. All right, so let's look at the directions. It says we're looking for only one of the factors. So only one of the factors. So which one should I be picking based on the review? 3x. Okay, this 3x plus 5, which is D. So we should be picking D. Questions on that number 1? Need to backtrack anywhere? Okay, so we're good to go. We'll be moving on to 2.
Does anyone still need file number 1 on the board? Problem number 2 involves an absolute value inequality, way back from chapter 2. Remember that before you solve, you have to isolate the absolute value. So what do we have to move first?
2.
At this stage, we have to determine whether we're going to have an and or an or statement. So less than means and or or? less than means we're going to have an and statement. So the setup for an and statement is you take the opposite of the number on the other side, so negative 12. The part that's in the absolute value gets put in the middle, and then we have this less than 12 over here. From here, our goal is to get x by itself in the middle, so what do we have to move now?
1.
1, that's our first step. We're going to add 1 to all sides. That's going to leave us with negative 11, less than 5x. Plus 1 is 13, sorry about that. And then our last step to get x by itself is to divide everything by 5. So our final answer is that x is between negative 11/5 and positive 13/5. So which answer is that going to correspond to?
Okay.
Okay. Any questions on that one? I haven't seen that one in a long time, but it will be on the test. All right. On to number 3.
Any questions on this one before I erase it? Ways of solving a system of linear equations. What are some ways that we've learned previously? Okay, addition, elimination, substitution, also graphing, but we usually try to avoid that one unless it says specifically do it by graphing. So, which method do you think this one's set up for? Yeah, I think addition, elimination. So I'm looking at the problem trying to decide which letter would be the easiest to eliminate. 5. Okay, why? So what would I need to do to that top equation?
Multiply by 4.
Okay, I need to multiply by 4. So remember, whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side, correct? So we're gonna multiply through by 4, and I'm gonna have 24x minus 20y equaling to a negative 20. You agree that bottom equation we're just gonna rewrite because I'm not changing anything. And the method tells me what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna add, correct? We're gonna add the two equations. So what are we gonna get when we add the two equations? Alright, so 15x, I thought I heard someone say. Y'all in agreement?
Equals to negative 10.
Equals to a negative 10. And then we're gonna need to divide by 15. And that fraction needs to be reduced, so what would it be if we were reducing it, which we need to?
Negative 2/3.
Okay, a negative 2/3. Now, someone's gonna say, well, that's the only letter they asked for, but for me to be able to check the problem, I need to complete it, meaning I need to find the y value. So how would I go about finding the y value?
Substitute the value.
Okay, plug it in, and technically we could plug it into either equation. I think I'm just gonna go to that top one. And in place of x, we're going to put that negative 2/3. All right, help me out here.
Negative 4.
Okay, a negative 4. Y'all see where that came from? That 6 is really 6 over 1, which is a negative 12 over 3, which reduces to a negative 4. Once again, a negative 12 over 3, which reduces to a negative 4. All right, what else do I need to do to be able to solve for y?
Add 4 to get the y.
Excellent job. Okay, what else? We're almost there. Divide. Divide by negative 5, so y is going to be a positive 1/5. So what do I mean by checking? You know, I said I have to complete the problem, meaning I have to find my x and y to be able to check it. So what do I mean by that?
Plug them into the problem and it should equal the other side.
That's right, so I would plug it into the original system, and the information is going to have to be equivalent on both sides of the equal sign for each equation. All right, so they're asking for only which letter? The x value, so I need to be picking which letter in terms of my answer key here. E. All right, so we need to be picking E. So E as an element. All right, questions on that number 3? Are we good to go? Yes. Okay. We're moving on to 4.
4 is asking us to find the x-intercepts. This problem is a little bit from some more recent chapter. Now for an x-intercept, that means y has to be equal to 0. So when we have a quadratic equation equal to 0, there's a few different methods we can use to solve it. One is you really want to try factoring first, and then if it doesn't factor, try the quadratic formula. So let's see if we can factor it. I'm going to use the AC method. I'm going to take 4 times negative 3, and that gives me negative 12. 4 times negative 3. Are there any two numbers that multiply to give me a negative 12 that also add up to negative 4?
62.
6 and 2.
Okay, and what would the signs of those have to be?
Negative 6, positive 2.
Okay, so I'm going to split my middle term into those two numbers. So 4x squared
Plus 2.
plus 2x minus 6x minus 3. From there, I can do factoring by grouping, correct? What can I factor out of those first two?
2x.
2x, which will leave me with
X plus 1. 2x
2x plus 1, right? 2 times 2 brings me back to the 4. What can I factor out of this negative 3 set? Because it leads with a negative, I really want to factor out a negative 3. What will that leave me with?
2x plus 1.
Remember, since we're factoring out a negative 3, that's going to change that to a positive. Negative 3 times positive 1 is negative 3. At this stage, my two factors would end up being my common factor, 2x plus 1, and then my coefficients, 2x minus 3. And then what do I do with those factors?
Set them equal to 0.
Set them equal to 0. So I have 2x plus 1 equal to 0. If I subtract 1 from both sides, 2x equals negative 1, then divide both sides by 2. So x equals negative 1/2. Then if I have 2x minus 3, equals 0. If I add 3 to both sides, I now have 2x equal to 3. Dividing both sides by 2. So x ends up being 3/2 for that. Those are my x-intercepts. Now as ordered pairs, remember that y is equal to 0. So one of my points would be negative 1/2, comma 0, and the other one would be 3/2, comma 0. And that's going to be answer choice. Any questions on that one? So if it wouldn't be able to be factored, remember that you would go through the quadratic formula.
we're looking at problem 5, and I'm noticing we're dealing with two fractions and they're asking me to add. And I remember for us to be able to add or subtract, we have to have an LCD. And also, in the process of trying to find the LCD, my denominators need to be in factored form. So I'm checking to see if I can factor the 7x plus 21. So can we factor anything there?
Yes.
Okay, we can take out a 7, right? The greatest common factor. And looking at the 7x minus 21, we can factor out what? 7. So that looks good. All right, so I factored my denominators. I'm trying to determine the LCD from here. So I notice I'm going to need a 7. What else am I going to need for my LCD?
X plus 3, X minus 3.
So it's going to be that combination, 7 times x plus 3 times x minus 3. So I need to rewrite my fractions with that LCD. So I'm comparing my denominators, and I'm noticing what factor is missing if I'm doing a comparison here.
X minus 3.
Okay, so I need to multiply this bottom by x minus 3. So what must I do to the top?
Multiplied by X minus 3.
Okay, and when I distribute the 2x throughout the x minus 3, what do I get?
2x squared minus 6x.
Excellent job. All right, let's move over to the other fraction. I'm doing a comparison. Do you notice any factors that are missing?
X plus 3.
Okay, so I need to multiply the bottom by x plus 3. So what must I do to the numerator?
Multiplied by X plus 3.
And after we distribute the 6 throughout the x plus 3, what do I have?
6x plus 18.
Plus, what was it again?
18.
Okay. All right, we're going to keep going because they're asking me to add, right? They're asking me to add. So I'm going to keep my denominator because I'm trying to write it as a single fraction. All right, so let's see if we have any like terms. That's the only square term, y'all in agreement? So we're just going to rewrite it. I have a negative 6x and I need to combine it with a positive 6x, so those are going to cancel. But I still have a positive 18, plus 18. So all I did was combine like terms in the numerator. All right, remember before we say we're finished, we need to check and see if we can factor the numerator to see if we can reduce the fraction. So can I factor something out of the numerator?
A 2.
A 2. All right, now it's tempting to say that we can factor the x squared plus 9 further, but what's the problem? You can't because it's a sum, right? Because of the sum. So my answer should be written in one of the two forms. Keep in mind it could be either one. They're both correct. So let's see which one they have listed. Looks like they have this one, which is B. Questions on that problem? Anything I need to go back to? That was test 4, y'all's favorite test.
need a problem number 5 on the board? Number 6 is asking us to simplify a complex fraction. Would everyone agree that we just have one fraction being divided by another? So essentially we can do a same change flip. We take this fraction and divide it by the bottom, which means you flip it and change it to multiplication. So all we did was we took this fraction, flipped it over, and we changed it to multiplication. At this stage, what we need to do is we need to factor every single numerator and denominator that we have, and then cancel out common factors. So I'm going to go ahead and label 1, 2, 3, and 4 to keep my work organized. I'm going to go over here and write these all out. Dealing with some limited board space here, so I'm going to count on your awesome factoring skills to help me factor some of these out. So 2x squared minus x minus 21, what will that end up factoring into?
2x squared plus 6x minus 7x minus 21.
And what do the two factors end up being?
2x minus 7, x plus 3.
Remember, that's just using whatever method you're comfortable with, AC method, splitting the middle term, guess and check. 6x squared minus 6, do you agree that we should take out a 6 first, and then x squared minus 1 is a difference of squares. So we have 6x plus 1, x minus 1. What's the only thing we can do on number 3 there? Take out a 12 as a greatest common factor. And then on that last one,
2x
plus 3, x
plus 3.
thank you very much for factoring those. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to replace my original problem here with my factor form. So in place of 1, we have 2x minus 7 and x plus 3. Place of 2, we have 6, x plus 1, x minus 1. Place of 3, we have 12 and x minus 1. And in place of 4, 2x plus 3 and x plus 3. At this stage, anything on the top row can cancel out with anything on the bottom row. So we have some common factors here. X plus 3.
12 and 6.
Looks like I have the x minus 1, right? What about this 6 and this 12? Can that reduce?
6 cancels. Goes to 1.
Right,
12
so
is 2.
12 and a 6 can reduce, leaving me with a 2 here, right? Looks like that's it as far as canceling. So what are we left with on the top?
Times 2.
Don't forget your 2 from here. And our only two factors on the bottom are x plus 1.
And 2x plus 3.
So that's going to be our answer. And that's going to be which letter? Looks like E, right? Once again, another problem that comes down to factoring, right? Any questions on that one?
How would I multiply that to, well, we don't have to distribute that one?
You could distribute, that answer could show up, but notice that that factored form is the only version that shows up there. Even if you multiply the 2 times the 2x minus 7, that's not one area answer choices. It'll be one or the other, but not both.
Alright, so let's look at this number 7, and they're asking us to solve. So I need to get rid of the parentheses, so I'm going to distribute the 3x, which is going to give me 3x squared minus 9x, and that's still going to equal the x plus 5. Alright, I need all the information on one side because I notice I'm dealing with something that's not linear based on that exponent. So I'm going to end up subtracting x, which is going to give me 3x squared minus 10x equal to 5. And I need to move the 5 as well. Y'all in agreement? And so we're going to need to subtract it. Alright, we're hoping that it would factor. That's what my hope is. So let's look at it. 3 times a negative 5 gives me a negative 15. Are there any factors of a negative 15 that would add to give me a negative 10?
Negative
5. Okay, my hopes have just dwindled. So it's not going to factor, right? Alright, so it's quadratic. So what are some ways of solving quadratic equations? Okay, you can use a quadratic formula. Alright, so A is going to be what?
3.
And B?
Negative 10.
And C?
Negative 5.
Alright, the force is with us. Let's keep going. So X is going to equal to the opposite of B. Because that's what the formula tells me, the opposite of B. Let's just rewrite it over here in case you forgot.
Negative. Minus 4AC over 2.
And we have to be careful because that division line's got to go all the way across to B dividing the negative B by the 2A, right? That division line's got to go across. Alright, so X is going to equal to the opposite of B. That's what that negative in front of that B is telling me. So it's going to be a positive 10 plus or minus square root of, well, it tells me to take the B and square it. So a negative 10 squared
100.
minus 4 times A, which is 3, times C, which is a negative 5, all divided by, once again, notice my division line going all the way across, 2 times 3. Alright, now we just got to keep simplifying, right? So X is going to equal to 10 plus or minus square root of, what about that negative 10 squared? 100. Some people get really confused with the product here. Let's talk about, is it going to be addition or subtraction?
Addition. A negative multiplied by a negative.
And what are we going to be adding? Meaning when I multiply all of this, what am I adding?
60.
And once again, my division line goes all the way across to include the 10, and we're dividing by 6. Right, any questions up to that point? So far, so good? Alright, so let's make a little detour. So X is going to equal to 10 plus or minus square root of, well, I got to add here. Okay, 160 divided by 6. So far, so good? Alright, I got to move to the radical, and I got to try to simplify that radical. So are there any factors of 160 that would be a perfect square?
16.
Alright, so 16. So 16 times 10 gives me 160. Alright, any questions up to that point? So what's going to come out of the radical? 4. Alright, go ahead and get caught up to this point because I'm going to need some board space. I'm going to have to go back over there and erase a little bit. So let me give you a chance to get caught up to this, and then I'm going to erase a little bit. Questions up to this point? I don't want to erase over there if you're still struggling a little bit. So I just want to make sure you're caught up to here. We're okay? simplify them. So I'm going to do some factoring. I want to see what I could factor out that would cancel with Carter, all of that 6. Notice I kept the 6 in the denominator.
2.
A 2. All right, so I'm going to put 2, and I'm going to put my lovely little parentheses and keep my 6 at this point. So 2 times something brings me back to this 10. 5. Plus or minus 2 times something brings me back to this. So 2 square root of 10? All right, let me move out of the way. So I'm doing my factoring so I can do some canceling out here. What's going to happen with the 2 and the 6?
2 will cancel out.
That's right. We're going to get to get 3.
Remainder of 3.
All right, so x is going to equal to 5 plus or minus 2 square root of 10, all divided by 3. How many answers do we really have here? 2. Why are we saying we have 2?
Does it have plus or minus?
That's right, plus or a minus. All right, so let's look at how they wrote their answers. So I should be picking A. So A is an apple. Keep in mind, if they wanted to, could they have written them separately?
Yes.
Or
They have the right. Because it means the same thing, right? This is saying this is an answer or that's an answer. So they could have written it this way if they wanted to. But I'm not going to write it both ways. They would have it one or the other. Questions on that problem? Any questions? All right, that's problem 7.